What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another Mordian Glory episode. Wait a second, it's the wrong channel. But welcome back, everyone. I'm Joshua Joshi Howard. Today, we're actually going to be talking about a game that Mordian Glory played on stream recently at the Stonehammer Gravel Pit up against Aiden Smalley from Vanguard Tactics. Of course, my name is Joshua Joshi Howard, and we're going to be going over this game. A lot of you guys were liking the John Lennon versus Folger Piles video that I did a couple of days ago, so I figured might as well get the clickbait out right away while it's still topical. So today, like I said, we're going to be talking about the game Tim, Mordian Glory, Vass playing up against Aiden Smalley with Astromalatarm versus Death Guard. Yeah, Death Guard, that's what it's called. And to start off with, we can take a look at the list. So I always look at a lot of the lists that Mordian Glory brings, and I think like they make they make sense. They're functional lists, but they're usually not like hyper optimized like a lot of GT lists that I tend to look at. And there's a couple small optimizations that I look at this list in general in order to try and change things up a little bit. So the first one, if this is correct, I didn't go into the best coast pairings to double check. If this is correct, the regimental engine seer being the warlord is just worse than the Militarum Tempestus Command Squad being the Warlord because there's no downside to making your Tempestus Scions battle line. So it doesn't come up in most games, but it is just a small optimization there. The other thing, I hate the Dakadorn. The Bolter's Dorn without multi-meltas and with heavy bolters instead, I think is an indefensible decision most of the time, to be entirely honest. There's a yeah, if you want to know more, I have a video that I did on the Rogaldorn in general. I think the bolters in general are just terrible on everything that you can't pick something better. So it's like heavy bolters, if you can put like multi-meltas, plasma cannons, um, basically anything else, you should do that. The only thing where I think you really have a decision point is if it's heavy bolters versus heavy flamers. Sometimes that is something to think about. Anyway, so that's going through. They play up against Aiden Smalley and their Death Guard. Now, something that is missing from this list that they did have on the board were 2 units of 3 Nurglings as well. But otherwise, it's a pretty normal looking Death Guard list these days in terms of Death Shroud spam. A couple of characters, a Lord of Contagion, Mortarion, Typhus, with the Poxwalkers, some Cultists, and then just some other scoring pieces and the firepower. This can either be the Predator Destructors, but I've also seen versions of this list that use Wardlock Brigands instead. Overall, it's a fairly standard pressure kind of list coming out from Death Guard that relies a lot on how it does its rapid ingresses and how much center control it can take. As we take a look at deployment, one of the major things to think about is that this ruin and this ruin are very natural staging spots, but it is fairly far from the edge of this ruin to this back corner. So it's not the easiest thing, and Death Shroud don't do this super well because they don't have access to advance and charge, and they move 4. So if you just move 4 and then try and go for a charge onto the back edge of this, it's not that exciting. In comparison, if we have like a Chimera here and the guys get out, they move 3 and then move 6, and we can pretty easily make charges. We just don't have anything that is exciting to make those charges with. So the fact that this board is super open, but everything basically always has cover, is definitely something that is in favor of the guard. They are playing on Purge the Foe, which is not good for us, but it is, I believe it's on Tipping Point. Let's double check. It is on Tipping Point with the Inspired Leadership. The most, like, irrelevant mission rule I think I've ever seen. It's like +1 to your leadership if you can see your Warlord and the Warlord's, like, not in no man's land or something weird. Anyway, a couple of general thoughts on this. You can see that the tanks mostly just kind of start on the line. I'm pretty sure the deployment zone is basically like this. I think he could have been a little bit more aggressive with this, actually. Maybe it's here. But the biggest thing is you can see that Aiden chose to only put 1 Predator Destructor on the board, and 1 Predator Destructor does like no damage to anything heavier than a Chimera. So the Rogel Doran can be a bit more aggressive. The tank commanders can be a bit more aggressive. As long as you're getting cover, it's going to be a-okay. We know that Aiden Smalley ended up choosing the -1 to save as his contagion, in addition to the -1 toughness that you always get. So it is going to come up a little bit later in the game, but it usually doesn't come up on turns 1 or 2. Anyway, The major deployment mistake that I already saw at the beginning, I'll come back to this a little bit later, is this tank commander in the green is the one with Grand Strategist. And I think that these two tank commanders really need to switch spots because as you'll see later on in the game, this tank commander ends up having to give up orders several times throughout the game in order to order the Dorn, or it doesn't order the Dorn and it orders itself. Whereas if you have the green one with Grand Strategist here doing that, that's not a choice you have to make. You just be like, yeah, both these things have take aim, these things have move, 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 whatever. And we'll see this end up coming up a couple of times later on. Overall, I think the deployment makes a lot of sense. You got a lot of pressure coming through, and we'll see how the early game actually goes through. So to start with, Mordian Glory ends up winning off the roll in order to go for scouts and getting turn 1, which is generally pretty bad for guard, especially on Purge the Foe, because it's really hard to threaten hold more for a lot of the game, and it's also really difficult because you should expect that your opponent is going to be holding more and usually killing more in the bottom of 5. So we're generally looking at a expected 8-point deficit, and if you lose something on turn 1 without killing something on turn 1, by going first, it's oftentimes like a 12-point deficit that you have to try and make up simply going first on this mission. We see, so there's a little bit of like issues throughout the course of the game as to like whose secondaries are whose, but it does end up getting sorted out. It doesn't really affect anything. But Tim ends up drawing Established Locus and Cleanse. And when I look at this immediately, there's a couple of things that we need to look at this board in order to try and figure out what our early game plan is. So first thing, there's only one thing on the board that we're ever going to be killing, and it is this unit of Nurglings right here. So we generally want to be taking our 4 points because you take a look at where these chimeras are. If these chimeras move forward basically at all, you should expect that one of them is likely to die to this predator. So you need to make sure you're going to be getting your 4 points, and the Nurglings are basically the only place that we can do it. There might be another unit of Nurglings here, but I think it's actually back here. Either way, so these Nurglings, we got to kill those. The other thing is the game is asking us to push 3 buttons. We're trying to push a button in the middle of the board, and we're trying to push 2 buttons on No Man's Land objectives. So one of them is really easy. You take this Chimera, and you can either disembark the guys or not, and it's going to move onto this objective. That's going to be 2 points for Cleanse. Easy. Now we have a couple of decisions to make. One, do we want to get both Established Locus and Cleanse? Because an option to do that, this Chimera can move out and just toe on its objective and disembark guys, something like this, in order to get both Established Locus and Cleanse on the No Man's Land objective. This is the plan that I would probably go with. However, I was talking to another couple of strong players, and their suggestion was that you take this Chimera, you just tow it onto this objective, and you end up throwing away Established Locus because it's only 2 points and you get a CP out of it. I think both lines are defensible, but I like the one where you put the Chimera and like Catachan just barely on this objective because this is really far. This is pretty darn far. This is really far. You're not really taking any charges, and you're already expecting you're going to be losing something on turn 1 anyway. So if you have 2 units on this objective, you're going to be able to hold more going into turn 2, which is 4 of the 12 to 8 or 8 to 12 points that we really need to make up. I think both lines are fine. The last big thing is if you do both Establish and Cleanse here, or you choose to throw away Establish Locus instead, both of these Chimeras are now free to just move up and shoot at these Nurglings without really thinking about it. So these are the general things we need to do. The other major things we've already identified is this Predator is the entirety of Death Guard shooting on turn 1. Everything else is like strength 3 to 5 flamers in the rest of the army, and then whatever little pot shots like Mortarion puts out. Mortarion does not shoot very hard. So generally, this Rogel Dorn, these tank commanders, and this tank commander can actually be fairly aggressive on the board. The one thing that you do have to be aware of is this Predator has a pretty good line of fire here, but this one is actually pretty tight. Like, I'm not sure, looking at it from this top down, if there is a spot where the Rogel Dorn can safely stand here, but even if you can't safely stand there, I think there's an argument to be made that you stand there anyway, just because the Predator is not killing a Rogel Thorn and should expect to die on the shoot back to a tank commander on a Rogel Thorn. So I don't think it's ever really worth it for the Predator to try and challenge this firing lane. It's only really got this one firing lane to shoot at. With all this in mind, let's take a look at what Mordian Glory actually does with his turn 1. So this is what the game looks like at the end of his movement. And there's a couple of things that I can see in here that I'm like, not sure exactly how I feel. So the first thing is you can see that this Chimera is touching the objective, and this one is also over here touching this objective. Now, I imagine that Aiden had nothing touching this objective because you don't want to give up early overwhelming. You don't want to give your opponent turn 1 or top of turn 1 storm hostile. So I imagine there's nothing on here. You should be able to cleanse it pretty easily. At the same time, this Chimera has moved in such a way such that it is just touching on. You're going to be doing cleanse. There's your regimental engines here. And this Rogel Thorn is a little bit more defensive than I think it ought to be. I'm pretty convinced that this Rogel Thorn ought to be something like this, because it is not at risk of any charges. Over this way, this Predator can't do any real damage. The Mortarion is not going to be coming out to play. And we can see that he's gone for a different line than either me or my friend would have suggested, because he is now going Establish Locus, and then cleanse, and then cleanse. At least that's the idea. That's how Tim is going to be getting his 6 points. However, in so doing this, there's only a couple of things that can shoot at these Nurglings. So this one has nothing else to do. It's going to shoot entirely there. But the downside is that right now, it is absolutely visible to the Predator. The Predator, I don't believe, even has to move in order to shoot at this Chimera. However, a Chimera plus a Basilisk only has about a 70% chance to kill all of these Nurglings. I don't like those odds. One of the things that I would generally do is I would look to get both of these Chimeras and the Basilisk if you need to, but then the Basilisk can shoot somewhere else. 2 Chimeras by themselves should kill the Nurglings about 80% of the time. So it's not only a higher likelihood that you kill the Nurglings, but then the Basilisk can shoot at something else, make it slow, -2 to move, -2 advance and charge, and also, like, maybe you kill a guy. Maybe you kill a Death Shroud Terminator. Anyway, with this, unfortunately, the game got fairly unlucky. So during the shooting phase, Tim put this Chimera into the Nurglings and this Basilisk into the Nurglings. And unfortunately, like I said, it's about a 70% to kill the Nurglings. He hit the 30%. Maybe it's better than that. Maybe it's like 80%. Regardless, he got unlucky here, and that meant that this Chimera had to shoot into this unit instead. Now, this gives us a bit of a different position where we can pivot our plan in a couple of ways. So as soon as you realize these Nurglings are alive after these 2 things have shot, you have a couple of ways to solve the situation. The first one, and I think the least accurate of the 3 options, is doing what Mordian Glory did, where you take this Chimera and also put it shooting in. Okay. The reason why I think this is generally not the best one is because you've already committed this Chimera out here. You generally want to get your 6 points. And then the other thing that makes this line worse is because Mordian Glory then decides that this Chimera here is going to establish Locus instead of cleansing. Now remember what I was saying about what my friend was arguing is that he never would have done establish Locus in the first place. And because establish Locus in the middle and cleanse on an objective are worth the same points, they're both worth 2, if you do cleanse and get rid of establish Locus, you can get a CP. So by taking 2 points on cleanse and 2 points on established Locus to clear both of the objectives, instead of getting a CP, he puts himself in an awkward position. The other line that I think really should have been done, so the first line, I think, I don't really like this line. I think the line where you disembark here in the first place is also better than this one. But the other line that I really like is this Chimera, based on, I was trying to figure out how far it is based on, there's a guy on here and they're 25 millimeters. So almost an inch, 25 millimeters instead of 25.4 millimeters. The distance from this Chimera to these Nurglings was about 6 inches, meaning that you're generally looking at somewhere between a 5 and a 6 inch charge. I think the best line to actually go for in this situation is you probably take the cleanse, ditch establish Locus, or rather, okay, cleanse establish Locus, and then cleanse down here, but you make sure this Chimera is looking at a 3 or a 4-inch charge so that you can go and tank shock the Nurglings afterwards. You spend 1 CP, kill this off in case you get lucky by always having the backup plan just in case things don't go your way, because a Chimera is generally going to be doing 3 mortal wounds, and the Nurglings were left at 2. So all this combined generally comes up to you getting 6 points on Established Locus and Cleanse, or you end up having an extra CP after this. And unfortunately, Mordian Glory takes a line that only gives him 4 points and no extra CP. But the game is still, as we've seen, still in a totally okay position. Yeah, so now we have a couple of different lines we could have taken on turn 1 in order to get us either 2 more points or an extra CP than what we actually saw take place. As we go into Aiden's turn, Aiden takes some pretty normal moves. You have, like, this is Typhus and his friends move up. This is a unit of cultists. They don't do a whole lot of damage, but they show up onto the objective because he also draws Established Locus and Cleanse. You got a couple drones out here. These Death Shroud Terminators move up. And I actually think that Aiden probably could have been a little bit more aggressive with these Death Shroud Terminators if he had put them, let's go with a different color, if he had put them, like, here instead, because they only have a 12-inch range, which is, you know, maybe like this. There's always going to be space over here for the Aquilans to drop in and just kill the cultists off the point if they need to. And so he said, like, I'm going to put them here so that they can overwatch, excuse me, if you come too close, and that doesn't actually accomplish anything. Other than that, Aiden's moves make a lot of sense to me. This guy moves a little bit, but it still ends up shooting, I think, at this Chimera, which it didn't have to move in order to do that. And I think it gets heavy somehow, but by moving within range of Mortarion, you get, like, reroll 1s to wound. But yeah, so generally the game plan here is Mordian Glory only killed the 1 unit of Nurglings here, and you should be looking at a situation where you can kill 1, maybe 2 units back. Either way, you don't get kill more in turn 1, and ultimately, there's only 1 spot to cleanse here because your units are just so slow you can't really locus or cleanse without losing something that matters a lot to Death Guard. So he ends up only taking the 2 points. As we take a look at how the shooting moves overall, we do end up seeing that the Chimera here has died. There's a little bit of damage done to this. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to have taken 2 more damage, but regardless, guys disembark this way, and then they're going to get charged by cultists. Very normal stuff overall. Here's what it looks like after the charge. Cultists are in, and let's see. Yeah, okay. So this is after the charge and the fight phase, so there's still, like, a mix of Catachan and cultists right here on the point. Okay, cool. So looking at all of this, one of the major things, so if nothing else had changed, we would have been rewarded for just having, like, a Catachan guy on here, but the possibility is there of maybe these Death Shrouds move out this way in order to burn the Catachan off, but then you have this tank commander who's ready to shoot them back. You have this tank commander who can potentially move this way and also shoot them back. It ends up being a really good trade for us overall. Anyway, this is where we got to look at what the rest of the game looks like. Tim has already gotten +4 for holding this middle objective, so that 8 to 12 point deficit we're staring at the very beginning of, we have already recovered 4 points on it, and because we scored an extra 2 points on our turn 1 secondaries, we are actually, instead of being 8 to 12 points behind, we're only 2 to 6 points behind, which is already a really good position for us to be in. Now, one of the major things that we do have to start thinking about is on turn 2, remember there's a unit of 6 Death Strike Terminators who are just hanging out in the reserves. And we need to start thinking about where are they likely to come in places that are going to be a problem for us. Now, naturally, this is one of the reasons why I think Aiden could have moved this a bit more aggressively with his original unit of Death Shrouds. There's a really good position here that you could potentially come in where the shooting lines are actually really harsh. You have, like, here and, like, here. And you're not coming in here. There's nothing that can get to here. There's not any reserves that Mordian Glory has. So, like, this shooting line, like, maybe you're taking a Chimera, right? This is a really good Rapid Ingress position. The other one that you're generally looking at is right in here. And this is one where it doesn't necessarily like get you a whole lot of aggressive pressure right away, but if you rapid ingress, suddenly you're looking at a 5-inch charge into things rather than a 9-inch charge, which is way better. So you generally want to screen out this, you want to screen out this, and there's not really room here because there's already just stuff in here. And that's why I don't like this guy being here, is because this is, a spot where they can be, and now you have this room to rapid ingress. Okay, anyway, with that in mind, there's only a couple of ways to screen out this part of the board. One, you can drop like scions over here, and that sounds really bad. That sounds really expensive. The other way is you have like, I think there's like 4 or 5. No, there's 5 because they didn't have to take a battle shock test. One of the things that a lot of people don't use to their advantage is you actually have the ability to intentionally take desperate escapes when you choose to fall back. Desperate escape just says if, as part of your move, you move through something that you're in combat with, you will have to take a desperate escape for every model that does so. And so what I would have really liked to see is this unit of 5 intentionally takes a desperate escape and moves over here somewhere in order to push this all the way back here. Now, there's probably a way to do it. Again, I'm not on the board, but there's almost definitely a way where if you do your fallback, and you get to see how many guys die before you do the move, where this unit can't actually overwatch them. You're not necessarily worried about taking your opponent off this objective because you're planning to kill them, but if you can push the rapid ingress back even further, it helps a lot. The other place here, I mean, it's not really an issue. If they rapid ingress over here, who cares? This is not a real rapid ingress. You just need to make sure that you have enough firepower that is like going across these firing lines, that your opponent can't like rapid ingress into the middle of the board. So let's take a look at how Mordian Glory actually takes his turn. So the first thing he does is, as he brings down the equivalents over here, they're going to kill these cultists, and as you can see, this Overwatch doesn't do any, like, there's not an Overwatch here. So the leaving Death Shards behind that Aiden was talking about ends up not benefiting them at all. This Chimera, moving forward, has screened out. There's now no space here to rapid ingress anyway. There's not really space to rapid ingress over here for a ways, but one of the major opportunities that I think was missed here is that this tank commander has like a line here, and these chimeras are not going to do any damage to Death Shroud Terminators at all. There's actually a really good position to potentially rapid ingress Death Shroud Terminators here. The other thing is down here, there is a trick that Mordian Glory did use, is he took the guys that were in combat and he took the guys that were in this Chimera. The guys in this Chimera ran over this way, and the guys that were in combat ran into the Chimera. And because the Chimera didn't fall back, the Chimera is going to be able to use their shots from firing deck. So ultimately, it is a nice trick that Mordian Glory did find. I just don't think it was the optimal line, and a major reason for that is because immediately afterwards, here's the rapid ingress from the Death Shroud Terminators. And suddenly, your opponent is really asking questions about how you're controlling any of the No Man's Land objectives. Before, there was a possibility where just by having guys here, you are forcing your opponent to try and deal with them relatively early on. Yeah, you're going to kill these cultists. Yeah, you should expect to kill this. Yeah, these cultists can die. And there was actually like a bunch of them over here that died to a flamer. He killed 5 of them, which is pretty cool. And now your opponent, they've staged up in this ruin. You no longer really have control of this because you're going to get charged. You no longer are playing for control of this because of Death Shroud Terminators. And these Death Shroud Terminators are going to pretty easily make their charge into this. Okay. So ultimately, I think there were a couple of small movement mistakes and a couple of like conceptual mistakes that we've already seen. This tank commander being back here is part of like the issue. This regimental engineer actually could have like ran over here and like screen this out instead, and potentially given yourself an opportunity to like, you give the 4++ here, which is not as cool as on the Dorn, but you make sure like the regimental engineer, there's not shooting on the other side of the board that we care about, especially this early. So the Dorn could have been a little bit more aggressive. There's also guys in here, so like between the Chimera and the guys, like this is very screenable without these units. Cool. Anyway, as we go ahead and take a look at shooting, everything that we kind of expected to die did die, so these cultists end up dying, this guy ended up dying, these cultists end up dying. And then a little bit of damage, I think, was done to Mortarion here. Yeah, he's down to, I think it's like 9. So, like, this Rogal Doran took some shots, this Chimera took some shots, this Tank Commander took some shots. And, you know, it's free damage. Like, you're not really going to lose anything off of this. However, this Tank Commander is now a little bit at risk. But, you know, sometimes there's not a lot of harm to taking this gamble. Anyway, so overall, Tim is up a decent amount. He gets 3 on behind, and he gets 5, 1, 2 for overwhelming 4. So he's got 8 secondary. He's got +4, and now we get to see what it is that Aiden's able to do on his turn. So we go into Aiden's turn. Aiden says, this is the turn where I'm going to go all in and kill all of your scoring and try and kill this tank commander. Now, remember what I said about how I think these 2 tank commanders should have traded places? The green one here is the one with Grand Strategist. And you will see for the rest of the game, one of this Dorn and this TC are now going to go without orders for the rest of the game. Simply because this guy, like, I think he threw an order. He gave Ballistic Skill to this Chimera. Woo! Doesn't matter. Okay. Talking about the rest of it, Overwhelming Force and Defense Stronghold. Aiden brings in a couple of Predators here. These Death Shrouds that were here have moved up. Mortarion has moved up. The Predator has moved up. Typhus and the Poxwalkers have moved up. These guys have moved up. And this is just a go turn. Now Aiden's going to be like, okay, let's see how many of these Chargers I can hit. Let's see how many of the Chimeras and the guys inside we can actually kill. As we take a look at the end of it, at the end of shooting phase, this unit that Mordian Glory had here ends up just dying for free. They could have been, I think it's okay. Like, they just didn't hide in a very good way because, like, these Death Shroud Terminators were able to see enough of them that the unit just got picked up. There's still 4 Aquilons over here, but crucially, this tank commander died, and it was not within 24 inches of the Predators, which is not something that we have a lot of control over, but he ended up shooting it into Mortarion, which I don't think was the right answer. I'm pretty confident the right answer was kill these Death Shroud Terminators. Or at least, like, try and pick off a couple of them, because Mortarion doesn't, like, do a whole lot other than just be a really annoying body to remove, whereas these Death Shroud Terminators are massive problems once they actually start making some of their charges. But yeah, so we end up losing a lot of things we kind of expected to lose, and we take a look at what things look like after charges. So these guys make their charge, a bunch of charges happen in here, these guys double charge here, and then they pile into this, whatever. The Chimera dies, the guys inside die, this Chimera dies. This Chimera lives, actually, and this tank commander ends up dying. Or it died in the shooting phase, of course. But yeah, we've lost a couple of things that we were kind of expecting to. We gave up 1 overwhelming force, 2 overwhelming force. But the nice thing is this unit of Aquilons with the defense stronghold is actually threatening that because they are not all dead. They have the ability to advance on here, and if Aiden keeps defense stronghold, we can deny 3 points super easily. So really lucky that we still have enough of these Aquilons left in the backfield to be annoying. Okay, now at the beginning of this, so clear all the ink. We are in a tough position. We have a pretty good score. Looking at scores, so this is 5. So we have actually recovered the position that we were in before, right? Remember, we start the game down about 8. Because we got our kill on turn 1, we start the game down 12, assuming our opponent kills something on turn 1 and gets their 8 at the bottom of the game. We have overcome that already. We got our kill on turn 1, so we are only down 8, and then we got more points than our opponent on turn 1 secondary, because we got 4 to only 2 coming out from Aiden. So we are down 8, down 6, and then we got our 4 in the middle, so we are only down 2 points going in. We have already given ourselves enough outs that we are basically taking a game that is, from here on out, mostly decided on luck. And not if nobody makes any mistakes, it's going to be decided on luck for the rest of the game. So then we make a couple of interesting decisions. So one of the important things is that Death Guard, as an army, their army rule is everything is sticky. Okay. One of the major things that we are looking at right now is these Aquilons end up failing their battle shock. I think that is, it is what it is. Um, what are our secondaries? Sabotage and assassination. If we had gotten Storm Hostile, we would have done something very different. These probably auto pass and then advance onto this objective. But the other thing is currently, I'm going to switch ink colors again. Aiden is threatening hold 1, hold 2, and hold 3 with this one sticky, whereas we are only holding 1 and 2. We need to undo this because if we are currently down 2, we can't afford to freely give up down 6. So the main way that I would look to solve this is these guys disembark 3 this way and then advance onto this objective. These guys are not able to overwatch because they are in combat, so you might take an overwatch from, like, Typhus is in here somewhere, and then there's, like, it's only 12-inch range, so maybe, like, maybe two of these guys can go off with a flamer in order to kill us, but we need to get them off of this objective, otherwise we're basically giving them a kill more with a hold more. That's not what happens. What Mordian Glory ends up choosing to do is I think it battle shocks, but regardless, I think the idea was that it was going to fall back, but then you can't move after disembarking once you fall back, or you can't disembark after you fall back. So I think if these guys get out first and then you see what happens with this guy falling back, that's a much more accurate line. The other thing that happens is we know that this unit of Catachan here, which had gotten out of the Chimera that was here previously, is probably going to get Overwatch and died, because this is eight flamers. I don't remember if they're special. Like, I just remember there's a lot of flamers you're going to get overwatched by. So you know that your opponent is trying to overwatch over here, and we're asking some interesting questions from them. So firstly, these guys, they're going to run over here. They're already battle shocked, so they're just going to hang out. But this Catachan should be looking to move. I'm going to switch colors again. Let's go back to blue. And just wrap this unit such that our opponent cannot make any charges. Even if you overwatch, there are guys in this Chimera that can come out and do a similar thing. The main thing here is we want these Death Shroud to waste their time fighting Catachan. Okay? After that, we have 1 Tank Commander, 2 Tank Commander, and a Rogel Thorn, who, remember, one of these 2 things does not have an order, so it's hitting on 4's base, and they have the ability to pop smoke, and they also have, like, a second smoke stratagem called, like, Cloud of Flies or something. So we are in a tough position. In terms of, like, actually trying to kill characters, there's a character in here, there's a character here, there's a couple characters, I think there's 2 characters in here, and then there's a character in here. So we have, like, we're kind of spoiled for choice. Okay, so with that in mind, we need to take this objective. We need to kill something with assassination, and we also have sabotage. Now this is another mistake that I think Mordian Glory ends up making, because let's use purple. This entire piece of terrain up here is by definition outside of your deployment zone. And what you can do is if these Catachan, that's barely visible, we're going to go back to red. If these Catachan ring these guys, this becomes an impossible charge. Because you can move back. You don't really even need to be on this objective as long as you have someone there on your opponent's command phase. And this Chimera can move back over here so that it's not in the deployment zone. It's in this piece of terrain. Maybe Predator shoots it, maybe, but there are ways to do it such that this Chimera is unchargeable, and you can get another 3 points off of it. But this is what Mordian Glory ends up doing instead in the game. So this guy tries to make its Desperate Escape test first, and it fails. So these guys spill out, and they are battle shocked, and these were the guys that had already gotten charged by the cultists, so now it's a unit down to 4. These are Scions. They will end up being over here in a moment. But the unit that was here originally ends up getting overwatched by these Death Shroud Terminators and all dies. And so this unit here is instead the unit that was inside the Chimera. And I think this unit is kind of a waste. This unit, again, you go for the advance, and if you really need to, you re-roll it in order to do something like this, so that these Death Shroud Terminators can't go over here. This unit being on the objective, again, doesn't need to be. We are already denying our opponent hold more if we are able to get something onto this objective, and now we can also threaten a sabotage in order to try and get even more points off of it. We can't get our opponent off of the middle, so we have to go for something else. Um, yeah. So that's one line. You can deny hold more here. You can deny these guys over here. It's just going to come at the cost of units. It is important to remember that we should expect that this unit is going to die no matter what, right? This unit is almost always going to die, and depending, like if we don't wipe this unit is also going to die. So we're looking at giving up at least kill 3, or a kill 2 for sure, maybe kill 3 depending on how the rest of the firing goes. As we actually do the shooting phase, you can see that the scions that were here are now here. Between these scions, this tank commander, and this basilisk, we completely kill this unit. Awesome. This Dorn and this tank commander go in and shoot Mortarion, which I don't think is the worst idea, right? Like this stuff is not really threatening as long as it's not within charge range. But one of the big things here is that this firing lane, we should expect that 2 predators is pretty likely to kill a tank commander. This Dorn, again, just staying back. Why do we have a Dorn if it's just sitting back here? It is toughness 12 with a 2-up save and a 4-up invul. Your opponent isn't doing damage to it. Like, at this point, this is a 70-point more expensive Lehman Russ. Like, it's not performing its job being back here. If you're going to play a Dorn like this, save yourself 70 points, bring an extra unit of Catachan, bring an extra Chimera, and just play a Lehman Russ instead, like with plasma cannons or something. I really don't like the way this Dorn has been playing. But overall, Tim has still put himself in a spot where we're mostly playing a game that is going to come down to the dice. He's killed Mortarion, he's killed enough of the Death Shroud, and he's collapsed this flank. Now this means that we should expect a couple of things from our opponent. One of these units is going to have to come this way. This tank commander is likely dead. They're not necessarily dead. These Catachan are dead. These Aquilans are dead. And these are actually under a lot more threat than I think Tim was realizing when he actually brought them down here. So, as we go into our opponent's next turn... Oh, importantly, Tim forgets, or Mordian Glory forgets twice that the Scions have sustained, because they have the character with them. The character gives them sustained. He was rolling his lethals, but he always forgot that he had sustained. So they probably should have done a little bit more damage, and this comes up really big in just a moment, going into Aiden's next turn. So we got 5 on Assassination. And then here, we're going to lose a little bit, because this should be 4, and Aiden ends up doing this one for 3, so this is a -2 for us overall. So this is what things look like towards the end of the movement phase. Typhus and his Poxwalkers have moved this way. They've taken a pretty big overwatch, and again, unfortunately, Mordian Glory forgets the unit has sustained. He's just rolling the lethals, and it's very possible that the entirety of this unit of Poxwalkers, I think, are just gone if he remembers his sustains actually mattered. Because and this matters a lot, because as we go into the shooting phase, you can see that there's a lot more of them. So whenever Typhus kills things, so he did like 6 mortal wounds or something to the unit of Scions here, you get 6 Poxwalkers back. Not only does that make the charge shorter, but it also means that you just have a lot more dudes here that you have to be aware of. These guys killed this. This moved forward. This lived on like 4-ish. I can't read that. It's a 4 or 5. We'll call it 5 for now. So I got a little bit lucky there. This guy moved forward in order to do contain, so +3 there. But overall, we have lost total control of the No Man's Land objectives. So as we take a look at the charge phase, these guys hit their charge. These guys, I think they could have gone for this. This was like a 6 or a 7. But instead, he chose to go for like the 10 or 11 over this way in order to try and get into the Dorn. Fails it. They're stuck in the open. This charge goes through, tank shot, because it's now down to 4, and I think it does like another damage to it, so this guy ends up being on like 3 going into the next turn. But we are in a position where like the game is okay. So as we take a look, so Aiden cleans this up. He is now permanently threatening hold more, because he has undenied control of 4 objectives. So he's going to score hold more both on turns 4, or battle round 4, and battle round 5. So we are already down another 4 points again. As we take a look at, what is this? So that's in a charge phase. Oh, this is end of fight phase. So these scions are all just dead, like we expected. Then we go into, this is top of 4. What is this? Yeah, okay. So I skip a little bit because there's not as much left. This is basically what the game looks like going into, is it 4? Yeah. So in battle round 4, we will end up drawing Bring It Down and Engage in All Fronts. So we have a couple of Bring It Down targets that are pretty natural here. So the first one is this. All right, this is 2 points that we definitely need to be getting. We can bring the tank commander over this way. Zorgal Doran can contribute. This guy needs to get out of the firing lane for sure, or it's going to die to predators on the next turn. And then this is kind of our stretch goal if we want to be able to get another 2 points on Bring It Down. And this comes up to a very weird spot, yet again, where we should expect this guy is going to die really consistently. And then everything after that is about denying points, because we have a small points advantage, but even this is probably not enough considering we're giving our opponent hold more. So we have to try and find opportunities for kill more. At the end of the shooting phase, Mordian Glory is pulled pretty much entirely back. And I actually generally like this play. This Predator and this Predator are now no longer really shooting at any of our vehicles. This Chimera has moved back, so it's like not chargeable. This is not chargeable. This is not chargeable. This is not chargeable. Like, we have neutralized the Death Shroud Terminators almost entirely. However, we only killed the one thing here. And this ends up living on, I think, 3. And this is another rules mistake that might have made the difference. This is on 3, and Mordian Glory did not shoot the autocannon. So, like, I'm not saying it's likely to have killed the Predator, but considering how badly Aiden was rolling on his rolls, it's possible that it could have. And that would have saved some CP, that would have made the Predator not be able to move a whole lot. But overall, we are now in a very tough spot, and we need to be relying on Aiden, like, breaking secondaries. The other thing that comes through that was a bit of a surprise was Mordian Glory brings in a unit of Catachan just, like, down in here in the corner in order to get 2 points on Engage in All Fronts. I don't remember if he redrew something. I think he had, like, Call the Horde or something. And this is a Call the Horde target. But regardless, these Catachan end up coming down in here. These Catachan move back. And there's a couple small things that happen here which make the game really wonky. So the first one is Mordian Glory moves these guys here. I don't believe... Yeah, it's definitely not in advance. It looks like a 6-inch move. If these guys had advanced to here, they're, or like, you know, just be like somewhere in here, they are invincible. They cannot die. They cannot be shot, and as long as you make sure that this is not a possible charge, they're chilling. However, the game becomes absolutely insane on Aiden's next turn. I think generally this is a mistake. This one is okay, but it relies on a little bit of luck. And as we take a look at what that luck ends up being, Aiden makes a really big mistake on his next turn. So this is what the game basically looks like going into Aiden's turn 4. This Predator is on 3, okay? There's a unit of Catachan down here, and the mistake that Aiden makes is he moves this last, okay? Now, there are 2 things. The first mistake is moving it at all, right? Currently, Mordian Glory has killed 1 thing, and it was, like, this guy right here. You have an opportunity to try and kill, basically try and overkill this, right? To make sure that your opponent does not get kill more, because if you're going second, you have the ability at the end of the game in order to pick up that big win, that big 8 points going second. If this moves, it gets overwatched by the Dorn. And between the Pulverizer and the Oppressor Cannon, you're pretty and the Autocannon, you're pretty likely to get a couple of lethal hits that are damage 3 to just kill it. So mistake number 1 was moving it. Mistake number 2 was moving it last. The fact that Aiden chose to move this last meant that everything else on the board had already moved. And the problem with that is Mordian Glory had only killed 1. But if he kills this thing, he ends up killing 2. And there's only a couple of things that you can really set up to kill. One of them, maybe these guys can be like sickos and try and go for like a flamer here. Or something like that. But you have like these 4 guys here, and you have this unit of 10 here. So if you give your opponent this opportunity to kill 2, you are now in a position where you have to kill both of these things, or you're going to be giving the guard an extra 4 points basically for free. And so because he moves it last, it ends up dying to an Overwatch, and that means Mordian Glory has killed 2 things. And this is basically what the board looks like after the shooting phase. So Typhus is here. He like brain blasts these guys, and he splits some fire between these 2 units here in order to try and kill both this and the 4 guys over here. And Mordian Glory, actually, he loves go to ground, and in general, it doesn't do a lot, but this time, this unit survives with, I think, 1 guardsman. This unit over here, you can still see it. There is 1 guardsman in this squad. And so now you can see that by moving this and getting an Overwatch with lethal hits by the Rogel Doran, Mordian Glory was only supposed to have killed 1. And then if you had killed either this or this, you would have tied him with 1. And so Aiden actually gives Mordian Glory an opportunity to come back in this game. You even hear Aiden say, I think that might have been the game, because both these units of guardsmen are on 1. It's a little bit unlucky rolls coming in from Aiden and a little bit good rolls coming in from Tim. But regardless, it's a situation where if you had overcommitted into one of these units, it should die every time. But because you gave over this Predator for free, effectively, you're now in a situation where you have to kill both of them, or your opponent's going to be scoring an extra 4 points. And because he didn't overcommit into killing one of them, Aiden ends up not getting his 4 points because he doesn't kill anything this turn. So this ends up being a +8 swing going in for Tim, because Aiden misses out on 4 points that he always should have gotten, and 4 points that that Tim got that he wasn't supposed to. And that puts us in a very, very tight situation where going into the end of the game, Tim has 63 to, I think, 60. If this was 63 to 64, there's no way that Mordian Glory comes through again unless every single secondary that Aiden draws is a complete brick. And then there's maybe a small chance that Tim can actually come back. But as we go into the last round of the game, we can see that the game is, pretty, it's like okay. The game is pretty close. It's a draw of Recover Acid, Storm Hostile, and I think it was Cull the Horde. And he ditches Cull the Horde because, of course, you're never killing this. But with Storm Hostile, with 5 OC, this guy ends up being able to drive on here. And again, this matters a lot. This tank got move. We're going to do 3 M's properly. But this tank commander, because it's not the one with Grand Strategist, can't give itself an order. And so it's going to be hitting on 5s when they pop. I don't know what it's called, but whatever their smoke strat is called. So it's going to be hitting on 5s. This is also going to be hitting on 5s. Yeah? Is this one hitting on 4s? Goes from 4s to 3s to 4s. This one's supposed to be hitting on 4s. But regardless, this one is hitting on 5s. This one should be hitting on 4s because you go from, it orders itself, unless it loses the order to Battle Shock. So it'd be Ballistic Skill 3. It's a double -1 from being bracketed and smoke, but you can only be cumulatively -1 in its Ballistic Skill not to hit. So overall, this one should be hitting on 5s. This one should be hitting on 4s, depending on the Battle Shock. This one will always be hitting on 5s because it needs the movement in order to get onto the objective to guarantee the Storm Hostile. But imagine this one was hitting on 4s, right? The Grand Strategist once again coming back to hurt us a little bit. And so Tim ends up drawing Storm Hostile. He storms this one by putting enough OC. But if he had killed this unit of Death Shroud Terminators, suddenly there's a game. Suddenly the game is afoot, and it'll depend on whether or not this unit of Death Shroud and one or both of these predators can kill this Rogel Thorn because this last guy over here is always going to die. But ultimately, there's a couple mistakes back and forth. The game ends up being really close, and as we kind of close things out, you can see we storm the hostile objective, and this is Aiden's score. I think this is before secondary, before he does anything. So he ends up getting hold 1, hold more. So that is 8, and he ends up getting, because nothing died over here, he shoots this, so that is plus another 8 for kill 1 and kill more, and then whatever secondaries he scores. So end score ends up being something like mid 80s to 75. Now let's go ahead and back up. I think that Mordian Glory is actually a pretty good player, right? Like he clearly gave Aiden Smalley, who's like a 17, 1800 elo player, he's clearly very good. He gave him a really close game in this one. He got a couple of moments where he was lucky with like the Catachan being alive and this Catachan being alive. However, there was a number of spots where the movement was a little bit sloppy and the scoring was a little bit sloppy. So again, remember, if this had gone for a second cleanse instead of established locus, he would have been playing with an extra CP the entire game. If this tank commander and this tank commander had traded spots, he would have been playing with +1 ballistic skill on his Rogel Thorn for the entire game. There was another spot where, again, if these guys had intentionally desperate escaped and gotten onto this objective, you could have pushed back these Destroy Terminators, or would have had to come in somewhere else. And then, what was the other one? Oh, remembering that his Tempestuous Scions have sustain would have mattered. I swear there was one more. Oh, and then this, if he had gotten guys out and moved them out this way, these are all possible spots where you could have gotten yourself another little bit of shooting, another couple of points. This would have been a +4 directly by denying hold more. And the rest of them are a bit more speculative, like maybe you do a little bit more damage, and maybe that gets you a little bit more down the line. But otherwise, I thought this game was pretty close. Some movement things to think about. I think in terms of like target selection and how he actually shot, I think Mordian Glory generally did a pretty good job once he got to the shooting phase. But there were some spots in the movement phase where I think he could have tightened things up a little bit. And of course, movement wins games. Some good dice rolls back and forth. You know, some that went Tim's way, some that went Aiden's way. But ultimately, they kind of balanced out in the end, and then the Death Guard were able to take it down, partly because they were going second. So Tim had a mountain to climb. He needed to accept some risk, and I don't think all the risks that he accepted were the right risks to try and accept. And then, of course, a couple of spots where it could have been a little bit better. Anyway, this has been Joshua Joshi Howard. I've been talking about this game for a long time at this point, so I hope you guys have enjoyed this. We'll be back with another match review later on, and hopefully we're going to get our guard detachment soon. So I'll see you guys all later. Oh, thanks to the new people who have become members of the channel. If you still want to do that, there is opportunities to do that, and yeah, there'll be a link down in the description below or something. I don't know. Anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys all next time.